Bigger than I would have liked, but I guess it's pretty. It's black. Yeah, he told me it was pretty. I asked him what kind it was, and he said it's pretty.
All covered, right?
No. Pretty. Well, black.
You guys did that, so yeah, we all do it.
I don't know other people. Oh, it's, yeah.
Is Karen close to the internet?
The only person we're missing is Sherry. Maybe more. Not loud. Oh, I just wanted to go with His ears must have been burnt. That's why I let him in.
Well, good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, October 28th, 2014 meeting to order. Would everyone please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go ahead and start with roll call on my right. Gilmore here.
Kimsey here.
Mater here.
Lavella here.
Limer here. Austin here.
Quorum is present. Moving to the consent agenda. All matters listed within the consent agenda have been distributed to each member of the Planning Commission for study. These items are to be routine and will be enacted upon by one motion with no separate discussion. If separate discussion is desired on an item from either the Planning Commission or from the floor, that item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. Are there any items any members of the commission would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Are there any items any member of the public would like to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, can I get a
Madam Chair, I
motion?
move that we approve the consent.
I'll second.
We have a motion made by Lavella with a second by Kinsey to approve the consent agenda. Would all those in favor please indicate by saying aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with all in favor. Moving on to new business item number 1. Hold a public hearing for and consider amendments to Title 17 Subdivision Regulations of the Gardner Municipal Code regarding definitions and procedures related to applications for preliminary and final plats. Do we have a staff presentation this evening?
Good evening, Commissioners. Travis Hulse, planner, here to present to you new business item number 1 as stated. It was recognized by staff that based on the current code language, that there was the possibility, very likely, that development could be inhibited by the language and the way it is stated in the sections that we have here before you in the subdivision regulations that we have proposed to be amended, as initiated by the commissioners at last month's meeting. Just to kind of simplify the development process so we're all on the same page as understanding the importance of this amendment, prior to receiving a building permit, all development requires essentially two approvals and two processes. The first is the platting process, so a recorded plat, as well as either a site plan or a final development plan. The only scenario that this doesn't apply is for one-family or two-family dwelling development, single-family or duplexes, essentially. The current section provided here is what is in question that has provided us the understanding that this amendment being brought before you will help to encourage development and not create an obstacle as is currently present. So the portion that we're looking at is a recorded plat process. As stated here in section 17.10.010B, as states, except as otherwise provided in this chapter, no subdivision may be created nor any plat recorded with the Johnson County Records and Tax Administration Office until both a preliminary and final plat have been submitted and approved in accordance with the provisions in this title. The interpretation, and supported by our legal staff, is that a subdivision of land essentially may only be accomplished by a recorded plat, or as, quote, otherwise provided in this chapter, which is by a lot split. So that's the current code language, and I'll explain that a little bit more. You saw something similar to this last month. Essentially what it boils down to is that if you were to take the example on the left where you have a 153-acre site that was to be developed, but only a portion of that, you would first have to go through the platting process and final plat recorded through Johnson County. A lot of times we get applicants who will come through with a proposed development where they will not be intending to develop the entire site at that given time. So on the right, where you see a potential development site of maybe 20 acres out of that total 153 acres. Presently, with the way the code reads and what we just read through, would require that the applicant plat the entire 153 acres. This, again, creates an obstacle. It wasn't the intent to require development to do that, developers to do that. Another thing of consideration is the excise tax. 20 acres, for example, a part of platting requires excise tax to be paid. For 20 acres, an applicant would be required to pay approximately $174,240 versus having to plat the entire site, where you're looking at upwards of $1.3 million. So there's quite a difference. So based on that, again, supported by our legal staff, staff recommends the following changes to first, Chapter 17.05.020, which adds in the language of allowing or specifying unplatted parcels. That's where we've run into issues, is land currently not being platted requires that you would need to do that entire site. So in red is highlighted the additions to the proposed amendments in this section 17.05.020 of the definitions. I'm not going to read through those. Staff provided analysis in their staff report. And then as well, Chapter 17.10.090, which is lot splits, again adding language to include land that is not either platted or unplatted to be able to fulfill this concern. Staff recommendation that the planning commission hold a public hearing and forward these amendments to section 17.050, .020, and 17.10.090 of the Gardner Municipal Code to the city council with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Since this is a public hearing item, we will now open the public hearing. If anyone would like to comment on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the public record.
Madam Chair, I move that we close this public hearing.
I'll second.
We have a motion to close the public hearing made by Lavella with a second by Kimsey. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with all in favor. We will have a planning commission discussion on this item now. Questions, comments for staff? Very well forward. I think this is a good proposal. Well, if we don't have any questions or comments, very straightforward, I would entertain a motion for this item.
I'll make a motion that we forward this amendment, forward the amendments to section 17.05.20 and 17.10.090 to the Gardner Municipal Code and City Council with a recommendation of approval.
We have a motion made by Kimsey with a second by Gilmore to forward the amendments to sections 17.05.020 and 17.10.090 of the Gardner Municipal Code to the City Council with a recommendation for approval. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with all in favor. Move into other business items. Number 1, text amendments to streamline processes. Direction from October 6, 2014, City Council work session.
Good evening, Commissioners. Michelle Iger, Planning Manager. Just going to give you a brief update as to what happened at that council work session. There was direction given to work on a portion of what was brought to them. The city contracted with Clarion and Associates to work. They did an assessment of our current regulations, the zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, not the subdivision regulations, just the zoning ordinance, and provided us with analysis of things that we could change. In the meantime, while we're working on drafting new regulations, which could take a year to 2 years, things that we could change in order to streamline processes, make things easier for applicants, make the process better. These are a few of the amendments that we're bringing forward. There are a couple that we as staff had included in with that analysis regarding the subdivision regulations, since our consultants did not look at those. You will see these 4 amendments and then 2 additional amendments that didn't directly relate to the streamlining process before you next month. So the streamlining process items, one of them has to do with adding provisions for an application for a conditional use permit to reduce the parking requirement for a site. Right now, the provisions in order to get a parking reduction is either potentially with a plan development or with a variance through the BZA. This would allow for a conditional use permit process, which is a public hearing process before the Planning Commission, to reduce the parking, and that would, you'd have to justify that. Well, the applicant would have to justify the reduction. Where we really see that this would be helpful is in the downtown area. We've really struggled with discussing business, swapping out of the empty businesses with potential people, and, you know, there's no parking on site for these people, which is required by code. So we're looking at that. Next one is regarding the design standards, which we've already brought to you a couple housekeeping issues regarding the design standards. This one is regarding building material transition. It's in the standards, it requires that transitions happen on inside corners of facades. So in theory, if you're putting brick, say on the front of your garage, and you have to go to an inside corner, you're looking at bricking the entire house. So, you know, things that didn't necessarily get thought through until after you put them in implementation and you're requiring people to brick the entire house, and it just doesn't work well. The next one, this allows for a concurrent submission of preliminary and final development plans. In certain situations, this would be definitely beneficial to an applicant to allow for them to be submitted concurrently. Smaller projects that are planned developments, some of the larger projects, you'll get a preliminary development plan, and then you'll see individual pieces come through with final development plans. This would allow for that flexibility. Applicants, there's some portions of it that they would have to give thought to whether they want to do preliminary and final together or do them separately in case there's substantial changes to them and such. So, but we thought that an opportunity to do that would help. Then the last one is adding provisions regarding minor subdivisions. Right now, if you wanted to combine 2 lots into one, we don't really have provisions for that, doing more of a minor change to platted lots. If you wanted to take 4 platted lots and make them into 3, they would have to go through the entire preliminary and final plat process again. This would allow for potentially an administrative review. You're not having to deal with moving easements, you're just shuffling lot lines and such. That would be something that could be completed rather simply, and that would allow people to move forward. Those are the 4 items, text amendments, that you'll see regarding the streamlining. The other 2 have to do with the one I'm going to blank out on. One has to do with chickens and urban agriculture, and then the other one has to do with RVs and storage trailers and where you can park them and such. So you'll be seeing those next month. Stay tuned.
Great. Thank you. Our second item on the other business is the Planning Commission training. I know that we do have one person absent this evening, so I will just take a consensus from the other commissioners. Would you guys be interested in the training this evening, or perhaps as the other business item for next month's meeting, keeping in mind, like Michelle said, we're going to have these 6 text amendments that will each require a public hearing for each amendment. It may go a little bit long, but just wanted to get a feel from the commissioners. You guys would like to go through the training this evening or hold off until next month? It's completely you guys.
Michelle, did I hear you say the training would go about 20 minutes?
Yeah, I'd say 15-20 minutes. It's basically a brief high-level overview. All but one of you have been through this before, so it's just the highlights.
I think we can probably push it.
What, I'm Brad.
I was gonna say, being the one that hasn't been through it before, I would be fine with
doing it tonight, but, if I'm the only one.
Weimer would like to push it, Lavella. Lavella would like to push it, Jim seems.
15 to 20 minutes gets us around 7:30, so I'm not averse to staying.
Gilmore?
Is everyone gonna be here next week?
I would assume everyone's going to be
I
here.
mean, next month.
Next month.
Sometime next
We've
Next-
got,
Next
looks like
month's
we've
a
got.
week earlier, right? I'm,
Well, let's go ahead and go with the training. Let's make sure we get Brad up to speed since he's here this evening. And, everyone can, make sure Commissioner Barber is aware of what she misses.
Mr. Fox is, passing out some, things I'm gonna talk about, just some little helpful things that we have. If you don't have the bylaws with you and need a copy of them, I do have a copy of those. Just let me know. This is just my brief agenda. We're gonna talk about the bylaws, quasi-judicial proceedings, coma and cora, meeting procedures, development review process, and development regulations. 15 to 20 minutes.
Go.
As far as the bylaws, I'm just gonna touch on the things that, are very important. It is all important. These are the things that are very important. Chairman presides in all the meetings. With the absence of the chairman, the vice chair acts and, runs the meeting. The secretary, which is the city administrator designee, which is currently the community development director, or interim community development director. New hat. Attendance, not addressed in these bylaws, but it's addressed in the governing body rules of procedures. You're considered in violation of the policy if you miss 3 consecutive meetings without an excuse. According to the verbiage in there, work is not an excuse. Attending fewer than 2/3 of regular or special meetings. It says, excuse shall mean more than inconvenience and including an illness or family emergency. Business commitments shall not be a good excuse. Article 4 talks about meetings. Regular meetings are set annually by resolution. You did that today. Special meetings can be called by the chair or vice chair for a fixed time and location. You did that last month. So these are all kind of fresh in your mind. A quorum is a majority of the membership with the planning commission that is 4 members, and it takes 4 members to do business transactions and take any official action. Agendas must be provided at least 3 days prior to the meeting. You will get your agenda packets by the end of the day on Thursdays prior to the meeting. I'm not going to tell you it's never going to happen that you won't get certain portions of it, or it may be pushed to Friday, but our goal is Thursday. That's what we aim for. We want to give you time to review the information. Article 5, conduct of the meeting. You have parliamentary procedures and follow generally Robert's Rules of Orders. This is kind of flexed a little bit, but generally this is what we follow. The addendum to the Planning Commission bylaws also has an order to the agenda: roll call, approval of minutes, consent agenda, regular agenda items, adjournment. Article 5, conducting of meetings. Continuances, also called deferrals. An item can be continued or deferred by the applicant, staff, or planning commission. The applicant is entitled to request 1 continuance. If they're wishing to request an additional continuance, that will have to be voted on by the planning commission. It is recommended that the item be continued to a date certain. Appearance before the commission, public hearing items, I didn't finish that comment. We have public hearings and we have non-public hearing items, and we'll discuss those a little later. For public hearing items, it's required by state statute. Did that tonight. Items that are not public hearing items, it's up to the commission's discretion whether they want to take public comment or not. Generally, if there are people here to speak on the item, we would recommend that you listen to the public comment. Again, you're not required to, but it would be recommended. Commission action, the voting shall be by voice vote. The chairman shall call for a roll call vote if there is a dissenting vote. All members, including the chairman, shall have a vote when present. Motions, you can motion to recommend approval, denial, recommend approval with any stipulations or conditions, continue an item, or table an item. Every motion must have a second in order to be voted on. If you don't have a second, the motion fails. That's very important. After a motion receives a second, there can be discussion on a motion, and the motion can be amended. We see that every once in a while it gets a little hairy, but once a motion is made and seconded, only the person that makes the original motion can amend it. And then there is a vote, and then whatever the vote is either moves forward to the city council or is the final action depending on what the application is. With the planning commission, the chair does vote, but the chair may not make or second a motion. Abstentions, any commissioner can abstain from any item if they have a conflict of interest, and if you have stated that you are going to abstain from an item, you must vacate your chair and leave the dais. That way there's no question as to whether you're voting or what you're doing. You need to have a good reason to abstain. Please don't abstain just because you don't feel comfortable making a decision. Sometimes decisions are hard. Sometimes they're not popular. But it is your duty to make decisions on these applications, and if you base them on findings of fact and information provided in the staff report and provided by the applicant, it's a good foundation for making the decision, even if it's not the popular one. Failure to recommend, depending on if it's a final determination or a recommendation. If it's a recommendation item and there's a tie vote, it is sent to the council with a no recommendation. If it's a final determination and a tie vote, it's considered a defeat of the motion, and if no new motion is made, the item is considered denied. Cross communication, talking to each other on the dais during the different items. Please don't do that. It can be considered that you're trying to convince each other of different things. If you have any comments, questions, or anything, please direct them to the chair, and then that way everybody can hear the questions. Most likely if you have a question, it's somebody else has the same question too. The applicant is not in attendance. The item shall be moved to the end of the agenda. If at that time the applicant is still not present, the commission can either continue and hear the item and take action, or they can defer the item to the next meeting. The bylaw addendum talks about public comment, gives times for staff presentation, the applicant presentation, public comment times, and that the chair can extend or reduce the time limit based on the number of persons who are present at the meeting. We did see that with the CUP for the gas and oil wells with the applicant presentation. I think you gave them a little more time. That's up the discretion of the chair. The general procedures for public hearing, this should be pretty familiar for all of you. Chair reads the agenda item, staff presentation, applicant presentation, any questions from the commission, and then the public hearing or comment section. Close the public hearing if it is a public hearing, and then commission discussion, motion, and vote. Quasi-judicial proceedings. The Planning Commission does act in a quasi-judicial manner. What that means is that it's a group which has powers or procedures resembling those of a court of law or judge, and which is obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them so as to provide a basis for an official action. That's what you're doing with, that's what we're providing you with the staff report, the findings of facts. The best example of this that I can give you is staff reports for rezonings. They have very detailed findings about, does this affect the neighboring properties? How long has this property been zoned as it is today? Is it going to be detrimental to the community if it's not approved and such? Staff goes through those. Those are I lost what they're called. The golden criteria. They're based on case law. We go through those. Those are more judicial findings of fact to draw conclusions in a more of an official way. Questions if it's quasi-judicial? Yes, it is if there's a public hearing required. And these decisions affect specific parties, does not have an area-wide impact. The due process offers fair consideration, proper notice of hearings. We take care of all of that with notice in the newspaper and mailed notice if required. Proper hearing process, the chair takes care of that. Complete record, you approve minutes at every meeting, which the complete record also includes the staff report and any attachments to the staff report that you receive, any public comments that we either hear here or are provided. That's all part of the complete record, and then anything that goes on with the council. These decisions meet legal requirements. Again, conditional approval or denial. They must meet the legal requirements of the type of decision being made. Again, decision on required findings, not on popularity, and that, I'll tell you, that can be really difficult. And that's why you should support those findings with the facts that are provided to you and given to you during the meeting. Another item we've been seeing more and more of lately, ex parte communications. This is communications outside of the public hearing. You will potentially get contacted by applicants, by the applicant's attorneys, wanting to talk to you. Not all communication outside the public hearing is prohibited, but it may create the perception that there's unfairness or bias. Your neighbor may stop you in the grocery store and want to talk to you about a project. It's really your prerogative whether you want to discuss these things with people. If you do, you need to disclose that at the meeting and share the information you may have learned with your fellow commissioners so that they can be entered into the record. You don't have to talk to people. You can just simply tell them. If you have any comments or any concerns, we would ask you to come to the meeting, share it with everybody, make it part of the record, but I wish not to talk about it right now. As long as you be polite about it, it's okay to turn people down. You know, stress that you want that information shared with everybody. So that can sometimes make people feel like you're not just blowing them off. So they can also submit an email to staff. They can also submit, you know, a letter, anything to get their information. Again, this is basically what I talked about, and make sure that you disclose before the item is discussed. I've had these communications with, you don't necessarily have to give the person's name, you may not know their name, regarding this project. Summarize what you learned or what you discussed, and that's really all you have to do to avoid that. On to Coleman Cora. I've gone over my time. Kansas Open Meetings Act. This basically just talks about meetings being open to the public. Really what we need to remember is that when there's a quorum of any board or commission, you need to be careful, especially when we're doing the planning or the comprehensive plan. We had to make sure that there weren't 4 of you at any of those meetings. That would be considered a planning commission meeting at that point. Also, serial communications. This is the dreaded reply all, where you end up having a conversation with everybody. You didn't intend for it to be a meeting, but you're all in the same discussion. Don't reply all. You will potentially get emails sent to all of you at the same time. Do not reply all. CORA is the Kansas Open Records Act. This doesn't really affect you a whole lot. It affects staff a lot more. Public records, people can come in and look at the files, can request copies of files, big requests, things that are not simple or more detailed. We request that they fill out an open records request form that we have, and that goes through the city clerk, and they have specific processes that she's got to go through for filing those. We're closing in. Policies and regulations, comprehensive plan, that was just recently approved. You got a paper copy of that with your packet. Those are our overarching goals and policies for the community. These are what we fall back on for supporting a lot of different things. Our subdivision regulations come out of that. Our zoning ordinance comes out of that. The design standards come out of that. It's used to support, a lot of times when we go to apply for grants, they ask you if you have a comprehensive plan, if the grant and the project are supported by the comprehensive plan, things like that. We just recently received a community development block grant, $80,000 for some upgrades to ADA ramps and sidewalks. I believe that I wrote the application, I should know. Things like that, we'll ask if these projects are supported by the comprehensive plan. It does make a difference in various things. And we are going out for a consultant to rewrite the subdivision regulations and zoning ordinance We're looking to interview in January for potential consultants and start working on that. We would anticipate probably 18 months, roughly, give or take, working on that. That would be ideal. So keep our fingers crossed. We'll keep you updated on what's going on with that, and obviously that will come before you eventually for adoption, public hearing and adoption, not adoption, action as far as recommendation, and then that would go on to the governing body, similar to text amendments that you've seen. These are the different action items that the Planning Commission sees. The ones on the left are the items that the Planning Commission has final action on. These items do not go on to the council. The ones on the right are the other items that the Planning Commission recommends. This sheet that I provided for you, this is actually my cheat sheet. It's a good quick reference for the different applications, whether they require a public hearing, who takes action on it. This probably goes a little beyond what you probably care to know, but whether it's an ordinance, a resolution, what kind of notice is required for each item. So that's just kind of handy if instead of, you know, oh, does this item need to come before us, and who, you know, process-wise, quick reference, thought I'd provide that for you. I use it very often. And then for each of our applications, we have a process flow chart, and that's what the next page is. They're all pretty similar. But they're tailored towards each planning application. The red dots will identify different things throughout the processes that apply to each project. They're all available on our website. I just provided you with one. But the red dots will identify which items apply to it. This is a rezoning, so you know, it takes you all the way from pre-application, and a lot of this you don't even see. So this kind of helps you figure out what's done before it gets to you with the as far as taking action. We do a lot behind the scenes with the applicants and with public notification and staff review, whether it be Public Works, Gardner Energy, interior staff. We use consultants for stormwater and sometimes traffic. We consult and let the school district know about different projects. So there's a lot that happens before you see it. And that's all I have. Okay, longer than 15 minutes.
Okay, Michelle? Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah. If there's any quick questions that anyone has for Michelle, I think it's a good refresher and some very nice cheat sheets.
And if you have any questions, you can always give me a call, shoot me an email. We can clarify things for you. If you need something more in depth, or anybody else wants something more in depth, please let me know, and we can schedule a meeting. Or if the commission as a whole wants more information on a specific item, we can do another training specifically on something. So,
Thank you. Not seeing anything else on the agenda and not have any questions or comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Not seeing anything else on the agenda and not have any questions or comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion to adjourn made by Lovello with a second by Limer. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned.
Great. Yeah, I like